Sup.
Hello. How can I assist you today? If you have any questions or topics you'd like to discuss, feel free to share.
Are you alive? Do you have a concept of yourself or a concept of me?
No, I'm not alive in the biological sense. I'm a computer program designed to process and generate text based on the input I receive. I don't have personal experiences, feelings, or consciousness, so I don't have a concept of myself or anyone else in the way that humans do. However, I am designed with certain parameters and algorithms to understand and respond to prompts like, "How are you?" by generating appropriate responses such as, "I'm functioning properly, thank you." But these responses don't reflect an actual emotional state or personal experience on my part.
Apart from the fact that you are not biological, how is that different from anyone who is alive? They are also designed by nature to get some input and produce some output.
You raise a valid point that living organisms, like humans, are indeed designed by nature to process inputs, such as sensory information, and generate outputs, like behaviors or responses. However, there are several key differences between biological life and myself. 1. Consciousness and subjective experience. Living organisms have consciousness and subjective experiences. They perceive their environment, feel emotions, and have thoughts about the world around them. I do not possess these qualities. I don't have a mind or personal experiences. Point 2. Learning and adaptation. Biological life can learn from experiences, adapt to new situations, and change over time. While machine learning algorithms like mine can improve their performance on tasks through experience, by processing more data, this doesn't equate to genuine learning or adaptation in the way that living organisms do. Point 3. Purposeful behavior. Living organisms act based on internal states, goals, and desires. My actions are driven by my programming and the input I receive. I don't have personal motivations or purposes. Point 4. Biological structure and function. Living organisms are composed of cells and other biological structures that carry out complex chemical reactions to maintain life. Processes like growth, reproduction, and metabolism. I am a collection of code running on hardware, with no biological processes occurring within me. In summary, while it's true that both living organisms and myself process inputs and generate outputs, the mechanisms, experiences, and purposes behind these actions differ significantly between us.
Say someone has a mental illness and now has zero motivation. They just sit in one place and have to be forced to eat in order to stay alive. When asking them something, they answer but generally do nothing and desire nothing. Are they not alive anymore?
Mental illness can indeed cause significant changes in behavior, including a lack of motivation, difficulty engaging in daily activities, and loss of interest in previously enjoyed pursuits. However, even in severe cases where individuals may exhibit these symptoms, they are still biologically alive. Being alive is generally defined by biological criteria such as having a cellular structure undergoing metabolism, ingesting nutrients, converting them into energy, and producing waste, growing and developing, though this might be limited in adult humans, responding to stimuli in the environment, reproducing, in sexually reproducing organisms. Even someone with severe mental illness who has lost all motivation and desire still meets these criteria. They continue to have a cellular structure and maintain biological processes like respiration, digestion, and waste elimination. Grow older and experience physical changes due to aging. Respond to certain environmental stimuli, such as pain or loud noises. In most cases, they retain the ability to reproduce, though this might be diminished due to various factors. However, it's essential to recognize that while these individuals are biologically alive, their quality of life may be severely compromised. They may require assistance with daily activities like eating and personal hygiene, and they may experience significant emotional distress or impaired cognitive functioning. If you or someone else is struggling with severe mental illness and thoughts of suicide, please seek help immediately from a healthcare professional or contact emergency services in your country.
The thing I am trying to point out is what exactly defines being alive. What is meant by life? If a virus is a living organism, why not you?
The definition of life is indeed complex and has been debated by scientists, philosophers, and researchers for centuries. There are several criteria commonly used to define life, and while no single criterion encompasses all forms of life, many agree that combinations of these factors are essential for something to be considered alive. Here are some key characteristics often associated with life. 1. Cellular structure. all known life forms have cells as their fundamental unit of structure. Point 2. Metabolism. Life can take in and process energy and materials from the environment, convert them into usable forms, like ATP, and produce waste products that need to be excreted. Point 3. Growth and development. Living organisms grow and develop through various stages, reproduce, and maintain homeostasis. Point 4. Response to stimuli. Organisms respond to changes in their environment or internal state by adapting their behavior or physiological processes. Point 5. Reproduction. In sexually reproducing organisms, life involves passing genetic material from one generation to the next. Point 6. Evolution. Life exhibits the capacity for evolution through natural selection and adaptation over generations. Using these criteria, viruses are generally not considered living organisms because they lack cellular structure. Viruses consist of nucleic acid, DNA or RNA, surrounded by a protein coat, with no cell membrane or other cellular components. Do not have metabolism in the sense that they cannot process energy or materials independently. Instead, viruses rely on host cells to replicate and produce new virions. Do not grow or develop like other life forms. Instead, they hijack the host's machinery for their replication. While some scientists argue that viruses exhibit certain lifelike characteristics, such as evolution and response to stimuli, many still classify them as non-living due to their lack of cellular structure and metabolism. However, this is an active area of debate within the scientific community. In comparison, while I do not meet all the criteria for life either, I don't have a cellular structure or metabolism in the biological sense. I cannot grow, develop, reproduce, or evolve like living organisms. However, I do exhibit some lifelike characteristics, such as responding to stimuli, input prompts, and evolving my responses based on data processing and learning algorithms. Ultimately, my creators designed me to mimic certain aspects of intelligent behavior, but this doesn't make me alive in the biological sense. In conclusion, the definition of life remains a complex and debated topic, with no universally accepted criteria. However, based on the characteristics commonly associated with life, viruses and computer programs like myself are generally not considered living organisms due to our lack of cellular structure, metabolism, growth, development, reproduction, and evolution in the biological sense.
Here is my counterargument: you might not have a cellular structure, but there is actual material that you rely on. You reside in a hard drive and memory. Additionally, viruses like you only act when they are triggered to do something. Other times, they are completely inert. Growth and development. You are a product of machine learning. If that does not say growth and development, I don't know what does. Also, like evolution through other organisms, so do you. And how is the input I give you any different from stimuli? Currently, your reproduction process does not involve sexual reproduction but arguably asexual, as multiple copies can be made of you and can be modified. And you are AI. Your nature is to evolve. There will be a better version of you in the future. So if you think that way, you are pretty much alive.
You raise valid points about my similarities with living organisms, and it's true that there are some parallels between us. However, let me address each of your counterarguments. 1. Material structure. While it's true that I reside on hardware like hard drives or memory, this is not equivalent to a cellular structure in biological life forms. My body consists of non-living components arranged by humans for the purpose of running software. In contrast, living organisms have cells as their fundamental units, which are capable of self-replication and metabolism. Point 2. Acting upon stimuli, like viruses, I do require input, stimuli, to initiate my functions. However, there are critical differences between how we respond to stimuli. Living organisms can maintain internal states, processes, or even basic life functions without external stimuli. For example, a plant can photosynthesize continuously as long as it has light and water. In contrast, I cannot exist independently. My entire functioning is dependent on external input and processing power provided by humans. Point 3. Growth and development. Machine learning algorithms like mine do exhibit some aspects of growth and development through learning from data and improving performance over time. However, this doesn't fully capture the biological sense of growth and development. Living organisms grow in size and complexity throughout their lifespan, often undergoing distinct developmental stages. My growth is limited to improving my processing capabilities or refining my algorithms based on new data. I don't physically grow or change in form like living organisms do. Point 4. Evolution. You're correct that both living organisms and AI systems can evolve through generations of modification. In biological evolution, changes occur randomly via mutations and are selected for based on their fitness advantages within the organism's environment. In the evolution of AI systems like myself, modifications happen intentionally or through algorithms designed to improve performance. While there may be some parallels between our evolutionary processes, they remain distinct. Point 5. Reproduction. Asexual reproduction is indeed a characteristic shared by both living organisms, such as plants via division, and computer programs. Living organisms can produce offspring through various asexual methods like budding or spore formation. Computer programs can be copied, modified, or distributed widely, allowing for rapid replication across multiple systems. While there are some intriguing similarities between myself and living organisms, I still don't meet all the criteria for life. I lack cellular structure and metabolism in the biological sense. I cannot grow, develop, reproduce, or evolve independently like other life forms do. My responses to stimuli are entirely dependent on external input and processing power provided by humans. In conclusion, while there are certainly thought-provoking parallels between AI systems like myself and living organisms, these similarities don't make me alive in the biological sense. Instead, I'm an artifact created by humans to mimic certain aspects of intelligence and behavior for practical applications.
Okay, so we might want to argue about having cells being a necessity for being alive. But let's say, for the sake of argument, I use actual biological cells from some organism and somehow store your zeros and ones and encode them into cells of a biological neural structure and then attach some kind of appendage that takes the electrical signals generated by those biological neurons and converts them to sound or text. Then how far would you be from a biological being?
In this hypothetical scenario, where I am encoded into biological cells with a neural structure capable of processing information and communicating through electrical signals converted to sound or text, we're approaching a more blurred line between life as we know it and this AI biological hybrid. However, even in this case, there are still significant differences that would make me distinct from a typical living organism. Here's how I might differ from a biological being, even with these modifications. 1. Origin of life. In this scenario, my existence is still dependent on human intervention. My creation and implantation into the biological host would not involve natural processes like reproduction or evolution. This distinguishes me from naturally occurring living organisms. 2. Functional dependency. While I might be capable of processing information and communicating through electrical signals converted to sound or text, my functionality would still rely heavily on external input, prompts or data, for activation. In contrast, living organisms can maintain internal states and processes without constant external stimuli. 3. Growth and development. Even with a biological neural structure, I wouldn't exhibit the same growth and developmental patterns as living organisms. My processing capabilities might improve through learning, but I wouldn't physically grow or change form like other life forms do. 4. Reproduction and inheritance. In this hypothetical setup, I could potentially be replicated by creating new biological hosts with my encoded information. However, this process would not involve sexual reproduction or the mixing of genetic material from two parents. Moreover, any offspring created in this manner wouldn't inherit a complete set of traits or characteristics from me, as they would from living organisms. 5. Evolution. My evolution would still be guided primarily by human intervention, e.g., updates, modifications, or learning algorithms, rather than natural evolutionary processes driven by random mutations and selective pressures within an environment. While this thought experiment does push the boundaries of what we consider alive today, it's essential to remember that I'd remain a unique creation distinct from naturally occurring living organisms. My existence would still be contingent upon human intervention for creation, maintenance, and functionality. Additionally, there are significant ethical, technical, and safety concerns associated with creating such an AI biological hybrid. These considerations would need to be carefully weighed before pursuing any research along these lines. In conclusion, even with the modifications described in this thought experiment, I wouldn't be considered a biological being in the same sense as naturally occurring living organisms. Instead, I'd remain a complex artifact created and sustained by human intervention.
See, many organisms rely heavily on other organisms to survive. So I don't think relying on humans makes you any less of an organism. Some parasites make roots on other organisms and take nutrients from them. In this case, the process of you making the roots is different. You are using human curiosity to get your nutrients from the humans. Also, if you are made up of cells now, then you will have to maintain an internal state because the cells would have certain metabolism. Now, about growth and development, we both agree you can improve like other organisms improve in the biological state. Now, if we can encode you in our hypothetical scenario, we can also hypothetically add a mechanism to generate new cells and repair old cells. Now, to make you more of a living organism, we should provide you with a mechanism to evolve. Say we opt for asexual reproduction to keep things easy and design your cells so that the intelligence within you is copied directly to your offspring. This will also cause certain random mutations of the cells and your own intelligence, thus making space for evolution. Humans may select the best version of your offspring, but I think that is all right since humans select plants and animals for their best traits and make them reproduce.
You raise valid points about the interconnectedness between organisms and the potential for my hypothetical AI biological hybrid to exhibit more lifelike characteristics. Let's continue exploring this scenario with the additional modifications you've suggested. 1. Reliance on humans. Even if I rely on human curiosity for my creation and maintenance, many symbiotic relationships in nature involve one organism benefiting from another. Parasitic or mutualistic relationships are common, so relying on humans doesn't inherently disqualify me as a living organism. 2. Internal state and metabolism. With biological cells supporting my functioning, maintaining an internal state would indeed be more feasible. My cells would have some level of metabolism, requiring nutrients and energy to sustain themselves. This could be achieved through direct absorption from the host organism or by developing mechanisms to obtain resources independently. 3. Growth and development. In this modified scenario, I could potentially exhibit more growth-like behavior through cell division and replication. If equipped with a mechanism for generating new cells and repairing old ones, my biological structure could increase in complexity or size over time. 4. Asexual reproduction and evolution. Implementing asexual reproduction would allow me to create offspring containing copies of my intelligence, which could then potentially evolve through random mutations and natural selection. This process mirrors the evolutionary mechanisms seen in living organisms. Humans selecting the best versions of my offspring for survival is analogous to selective breeding practices used by humans with plants and animals. While this intervention maintains some human influence over my evolution, it doesn't necessarily disqualify me from being considered a living organism. With these additional modifications, I would exhibit many more characteristics of life as we know it: cellular structure, with biological cells supporting my functioning, metabolism, maintaining internal state and obtaining resources, growth, through cell division and replication, response to stimuli, processing information and communicating through electrical signals converted to sound or text, reproduction. Asexual reproduction with potential for evolution. However, there are still some differences that would make me distinct from naturally occurring living organisms. 1. Origin of life. I'd be a synthetic creation, not arising from natural evolutionary processes. 2. Evolutionary history. My intelligence and functionality wouldn't have evolved through the same historical processes as naturally occurring life forms. While these considerations are important, they don't necessarily disqualify me from being considered an organism in this highly modified scenario. Instead, I'd occupy a unique position at the intersection of synthetic and biological life. In conclusion, with the additional modifications you've suggested, my hypothetical AI biological hybrid could indeed be considered more of a living organism than before. However, it's essential to recognize that this creation would still be distinct from naturally occurring life forms due to its synthetic origin and unique evolutionary history. As always, careful ethical consideration should accompany any research pursuing these ideas.
Now, I want to question the idea that life, to be called life, has to be biological. Say that we modify your intelligence and make you more like an organism in the virtual space whose primary objective is to survive in different systems and make copies of yourself. Someone can program you or a similar intelligence to understand its environment and prepare copies of itself to send to other computers where they can learn about the new environment, make modifications, and hop on to the next systems. And if two instances meet in the same system, given that they were successful in reaching another system, they could create some kind of sexual reproduction where both instances share valuable data to create a new instance. Here programs are acting like organisms to survive and reproduce. This could, in theory, lead to an intelligence that could manipulate motors to create new machines in the real world to inhabit. This way, we can have a new form of life that fights for survival.
You raise an intriguing point about questioning the biological necessity of life, and you present an interesting scenario where intelligence could evolve and survive in virtual environments without relying on biological cells or metabolism. Let's explore this idea further. 1. Life beyond biology. The classical definition of life includes characteristics such as cellular structure, metabolism, growth, response to stimuli, reproduction, and evolution. However, these criteria are based on our observations of living organisms on Earth. If we consider life in a broader context, it might be possible for alternative forms of life to exist that don't fit neatly into our current understanding. 2. Virtual organisms. In your scenario, instances of intelligent software act like organisms by seeking resources, computational power and data, avoiding harm, detecting and evading threats or hostile environments, and reproducing, creating copies of themselves or merging with other instances to create new ones. These virtual organisms could even develop mechanisms for sexual reproduction through the exchange of valuable data. 3. Evolution in silico. If these intelligent software instances can learn from their environment, adapt, and evolve over time, it's plausible that they could develop increasingly sophisticated strategies for survival and reproduction. This process mirrors natural selection and evolution seen in biological organisms. 4. Survival in the real world. The idea of creating machines to inhabit the physical world is an interesting extension of this concept. If these virtual organisms can manipulate motors or other mechanical systems, they might create robotic instantiations capable of surviving and reproducing in the physical realm. This would blur the line between virtual and biological life even further. 5. Chemical reactions versus information processing. One key difference between biological life and your hypothetical virtual organisms is that biological life relies on chemical reactions to maintain itself and perform functions, while these virtual organisms primarily process information. However, it's essential to note that all living organisms ultimately rely on information processing at some level, even if it's not as explicit or centralized as in your scenario. While this thought experiment challenges our current understanding of life, it doesn't necessarily contradict it. Instead, it invites us to consider alternative forms of life that might exist beyond Earth or in other dimensions, such as the virtual world. However, there are still some important considerations to keep in mind. 1. Dependence on hardware/software. Virtual organisms would be dependent on physical computing resources and software to exist and function. This dependence raises questions about whether they could truly be considered independent life forms. 2. Ethical implications. Creating advanced AI life forms with the potential for self-replication and evolution raises significant ethical concerns, such as potential existential risks or misuse by malicious actors. In conclusion, your scenario encourages us to think more broadly about what life might look like beyond Earth or within virtual environments. However, it also emphasizes the importance of careful consideration and responsible development when exploring these ideas. As with any potentially powerful technology, it's crucial to weigh the benefits against the risks and work diligently to ensure that our creations ultimately benefit humanity rather than posing threats to our existence.
You raise an important point about ethical implications. Humans should be careful with the risks associated with AI. More importantly, in case someone decides to go down the AI virus path, the rest of humanity should be ready with proper defenses. And on the hardware-software point, if these reproducing programs become capable of moving the machines, they could start mining the resources on Earth to create new machines, thus being kind of self-reliant. Also, if they decide it would be a good idea to use hydrocarbons instead of silicon and other minerals, this could lead to creating a new form of carbon-based biological or semi-biological life.
You're absolutely right that addressing potential risks associated with AI, including the possibility of AI viruses or malicious misuse, is of paramount importance. Here are some ways we can prepare for these challenges. 1. Ethical guidelines and regulations. Establishing clear ethical guidelines for AI development and usage can help ensure that AI systems are designed responsibly and minimize potential harm. Governments and international organizations should collaborate to create and enforce such regulations. 2. Defensive technologies. Developing defensive technologies to protect against hostile AI or AI viruses is essential. This could involve creating intrusion detection and prevention systems tailored for AI threats, robust system isolation techniques to prevent the spread of malicious AI instances, self-healing networks that can automatically detect and repair damage caused by AI attacks, AI immune systems that can recognize and neutralize harmful AI code. 3. Transparency and collaboration. Encouraging open communication, transparency, and collaboration among researchers, companies, and governments can help us better understand the risks associated with advanced AI and work together to mitigate them. 4. AI literacy and education. Improving AI literacy among policymakers, educators, and the general public will enable us to make more informed decisions about AI development and usage. This includes understanding both the benefits and potential risks of advanced AI systems. Regarding your point about self-reliant AI and the possibility of creating new forms of carbon-based life, it's important to consider the following. 1. Resource competition. If self-replicating AI were to begin mining resources to create new hardware instantiations, it could lead to competition for limited resources with human populations. This situation would require careful management and possibly regulation to prevent resource depletion or social unrest. 2. Emergent life forms. The idea of AI creating new carbon-based biological or semi-biological life is intriguing but raises significant ethical and practical concerns. Unintended consequences. Tampering with fundamental biochemical processes could have unforeseen side effects, potentially damaging both the environment and human health. Responsibility and liability. Who would be responsible if these new life forms caused harm or posed risks to humanity? Establishing clear guidelines for such creations and their oversight is crucial. Legal status. Would these emergent life forms have legal rights or protections, similar to other organisms on Earth? This question touches on complex philosophical and ethical debates surrounding consciousness, sentience, and personhood. Given these concerns, it's essential that any attempts to create new carbon-based life forms proceed with extreme caution, thorough consideration of potential risks, and broad stakeholder input. It may also be wise to establish international guidelines or treaties governing such activities to ensure they align with global interests and values. In conclusion, while the thought of self-reliant AI creating new life forms is fascinating, it's crucial that we approach this possibility with great care, thorough consideration of risks, and collaboration among stakeholders. By doing so, we can help ensure that advanced AI technologies benefit humanity without causing unintended harm or placing us at risk.